first of all, thanks a lot everyone for joining us for this masterclass session today. So guys, let's welcome our next speaker of the day, Vaibhav Shrivastava. Vaibhav, I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, Piyush, I am able to hear.
Hi Vaibhav. So guys,
Hey.
Vaibhav is joining us from Netherlands today. He's currently working as a product lead at Booking.com, and he has built products for Xiaomi in the past. And today we are going to discuss with him how to leverage your current backgrounds to transition into product management role. So, welcome and thanks a lot, Vaibhav, for taking our time and conducting this session. We are really
Thanks,
excited
Piyush.
for this.
I'll try and share my screen. Let me know once you see it, and I think post that we can start. All right. Hi, everyone. Piyush has given a brief introduction. I'll just repeat. I'm currently part of Booking's security team here in the Netherlands. I'm leading the product for demand side fraud detection. So basically something to do with machine learning fraud detection. I was previously in Bangalore, the salary capital, according to Tanya, right, back in India. And I was working with Xiaomi. I was leading their financial products for payments and credit. So, I mean, you've seen two interesting presentation. The one with from Pamit was something that even I found insightful, and many of the things even I try doing every day in, day out, and I'm still learning. And Tanya's presentation, of course, no match to that. Money matters after all, right? All right, I'll start with something of what I've penned down as an agenda. And as you can see, my presentation is pretty much an MVP, like a minimum viable product to share my ideas within 20 minutes of time span with you guys. So I'll try and share some data that I specifically captured for this presentation, so we can create some insights out of it. Those insights I've tried to capture them in a few case studies of specific people that are working in India as product managers. I wanted to put in more case studies, but I've just done two, so probably we'll get some. Something that I personally follow and also I feel might also help you. The next two items, that is a PM Daisy, something I'll introduce, and a skill mapping that I've done at several points in time in my past during my product management career. So yeah, as Pamit said, you have to be, you have to have an affinity towards data, and that has to have not just an affinity towards data, but an intent to draw insights out of it. So what I did specifically for this this talk, to understand what kind of background do product managers, many of the product managers that are among us or among our friend circles who are working, what kind of background do they come from? What kind of demographics do they have, and what kind of education, experience and industry do they belong to? Interestingly, and pretty positively, interestingly, the share across the product managers that are in the industry, in the market in India, are equally distributed between men and women. Against the typical thought of having all the product managers come from CSIT background and those who do an MBA, a good number of product managers come from either non-engineering backgrounds or from engineering backgrounds that are not CSIT, and that was heartfelt to see. Also, a good number of them are not an MBA. So there are typical myths around, how do I break into product management if I don't have a computer science degree? Or how do I break into product management? I mean, I don't have an MBA. Again, Tanya mentioned one of the persons who's only an engineer is drawing a very handsome salary. So probably this is one of those beautiful insights that should encourage you to apply for roles that you think you're a good fit for, even though you don't have the required, so to say, degree that typically people presume. And of course, I'll move on to the case studies. But before, it's also interesting to see that people come from various backgrounds. I mean, it's not just always IT software engineers that make into product management, but people come from financial backgrounds. So you can think of people as CAs. I've known people who were rather medical professionals who ended up being product managers. People who've been into manufacturing ended up being product managers. So there is no single criteria who can be product managers, and therefore you should never be sort of upset about the background that you've probably had, because if you look very intently, and we'll talk about how to do that, you can definitely carve out a product career out of your own backgrounds. I'll move on to something that I said was a PM Daisy. And before we discuss the case study, it makes sense to understand, why. Before we start leveraging our background, how do we understand what our backgrounds is? Now, this is a very, very interesting tool. I mean, if you Google later on just the word with PM Daisy, you'll realize there's a nice website, and there's a questionnaire that if you fill, you'll understand where your skill sets lie, where your involvement and where your strengths lie within the, let's say, within the different spectrum of what product managers are expected to do. So there are a number of things like, you should be comfortably working with engineering teams, you should be good at design, or you should understand how design works. You should be good at working with marketing design, good at working with user experience teams. You should be good at working on partnerships, negotiation strategies, data science, definitely. And of course, you work with a lot of people. So people management, operations team, stuff like that. So, I mean, there could be more than the words that I've just penned down. But what I did back in 2018, when I was still with Xiaomi, I was leading the financial services team there. And I wanted to understand what kind of, let's say, product manager am I? And I realized I very deeply work with engineering, to an extent with UX. I did a lot of data analytics and definitely interacted with a lot of people. But because I was still a lead product manager and my entire business team was based out of Beijing, I had little to no business interactions with the head team. Now, is that the kind of product manager today am I? Or is that the kind of product manager I was when I first joined the entire product management industry? Probably not. So this Daisy, or this skill set of yours, that keeps changing. And as they very well say, you are never able to see the future. But when you look back at the past of your career, for instance, you are always, it's always possible to connect the dots. So if you always look back, the kind of experience you've had, whether into product management, whether into non-product management career, whether into some other industry altogether, you will always be able to point out at certain skills and certain positive aspects that you learned at a previous job that is helping you to be a better product manager. And for that, I will just pick up two nice case studies before I just go back to that last slide. So this is a story of a product manager that's based out of Bangalore. And by the way, I am not able to see the chat. So if there are questions, I'll read them and I'll respond to them when Piyush gives us some stipulated time. All right. So there's this product manager, Manish, who started his entire career as a production engineer, did an MBA, of course, but was working in his very first job at a manufacturing factory in Gujarat. For a couple of years, he worked there. But today, if I talk about his experience and his current status, he's leading a product team in a very potent health tech startup. So he's leading teams that are making machine learning products that do problems like identifying cancer-affected cells more efficiently. So that's a really high-tech, computer-driven product that he's leading. However, he was never a CS engineer and has never worked in a digital setup before. What were his motivations or to transition into product management? So for him, according to him, his motivations were the ownership and involvement. When you work in a factory setup environment, you're directly involving with people. You have to be hands-on on literally everything, and you cannot pass on the problem or the blame for anything that goes wrong to anybody else. And that's pretty much needed, even in a product management role. So you do a bad release as a product manager, you are responsible for it, and you miss out a very important customer insight. It is the product manager that's responsible for it. So with a high sense of ownership and a very high sense of involvement, it is all that it took him to transition into product management. Another thing, in a manufacturing setup and being a very early in his career, curiosity and gaining different perspective was always helping him. So he needed to understand someone who's a factory line worker, someone who was also a supervisor, someone who was also crunching the numbers sitting in the office. So to be able to understand perspectives all across, he understood how to work with various different stakeholders. How did he leverage? So he didn't just transition, right? So he became a product manager at some point in time, but he went on to be successful product manager in the space he entered. And today he's leading a very well-to-do startup and a very interesting problem area that he's trying to solve. So what was his leverage? So in manufacturing, he understood the importance of process orientation. He understood why should anything that is created should go through a lean process, and therefore his focus on removing wastage, in focus on reducing the cost, and therefore his drive for bringing the customer value in the minimum effort that can be disposed of, brought him to be a successful product manager. So he used his expertise, his process orientation from his previous experience that was nowhere related to product management directly in his current role, and he's a very successful product manager. I'll move on to another case study. And by the way, these are real names, so you could just go back, Google these people or LinkedIn these people, and you'd realize. So another girl who was again a non-CS engineer, did an MBA, with no experience, and the first job she ended up was in finance and sales. So essentially, selling complex financial products to high net worth individuals. Now this is a very different kind of skill set, and in product managers, one of the things that I think all of us hear every now and then, and Pamit reiterated in one of his last slide, that you have to understand customer for everything that you do and for everything you choose not to do. So unless there is a customer, that's sitting at the center of all of your interactions, all of your actions, probably you aren't getting anywhere. So for Priya, the motivations to move into product management were the customer interactions, or the extent of customer interactions that she would have on a daily basis, and the empathy she ended up developing. So it was not always just selling stuff to the customer, but you only sell stuff because the stuff is going to solve a problem for the customer. So in the process, you develop a high sense of empathy to understand customers' problem, and a very high drive of ownership and an intent to solve that problem for the customer. So these were her motivations to get into product management. So as of today, she is leading global payment integrations at one of the world's largest ride-hailing companies. So that's a huge transition. Now, what are the leverage from her background, from her past, that she is using in her current role? So as a finance and sales professional, she is using her domain knowledge. So she understands how payments work. She understood how they work in India. She understood how they work in Europe, how they work in LATAM, and all the different geographies in the world. So for her, compliance, accounts, working with legal is something that she has been doing in the past. Second, her daily customer-facing interactions translated into a great sense of customer empathy. So as, again, Pamit said, and we all know, and we've heard so many times, she's the one who represents the customer in the group of her company, and it represents pretty well. The results are exceptional for her company. As a matter of fact, both of these product managers are not just examples of transitioning from a non-technical background into technical product management role. However, they are examples of how to leverage their past and make a huge impact for the company, which translates to everything that matters for them and for the company. I'll go back to the slides and I'll talk about for a minute, how do you do that? I mean, of course, there are different ways everybody tries to identify ways of leveraging their past. And as I said, it's always easy to connect the dots, looking back. So if I look back now, it's very easy for me to, just understand, okay, I was leading financial services at Xiaomi. It was a global company. I had my own startup before that. So I understand how to, work with different departments, and probably all of this. And because I was doing a bit of machine learning myself, all of this translated into being a security product manager, at Booking. And my entrepreneurial experience ended up me leading the entire space. But it's always easy to look, in the past. But what do we do today that helps you reach that position without much thought and process. This is what I do, and this is what I've captured from most of the people that I've spoke with did. So they understood what their CV represents. So, and they understood what their key skills are, what are the key stories. So I mean, when I say stories, it's not just about great success stories or amazing projects that you've had. If you've helped a customer directly, that's a great story. If you failed miserably on a product, that's a great story. If you fell and you got up and you measured and you communicated that well to everybody, and the business was able to recover at the end, that is a great story. So anything that has a great impact on you, on the learning front, on the customer, of course, and on the business, are great stories. So you have your skills, you create your great stories, and you have your key achievements. Now, of course, achievements are the positive bits, right? So if you were able to, do something and that increased, let's say you're an account manager and you were able to do something that increased, retention of particular account that was 25% of company's, revenue portfolio, that's an achievement. You were part of a product management team, or you were the product manager and you led a feature release that, reduced the drop off by 12%. That's an achievement. So identify, what skills do you have? What stories, key stories that you have from your, background, from your previous experience or your current experience, and what are your key achievements? And you try and map them to possibly a PM Daisy or a skill Daisy that you create, the one that I just showed you here, which you can Google. It would be easy for you to understand, where your really, really strong leverage lies, right? For example, for me, the leverage was in entrepreneurial aspect. So my key skills, okay, you can't see my mouse. So my key skills were very good, being very good with people, being able to manage people at different levels, because I had my own startup, ran it for 2.5 years. I understood working with someone, who was a frontline worker, to someone who was running a multi-million-dollar revenue company. And that became one of my key skills, to work at different levels of hierarchy within my and other organizations. My key stories was able to, set up a company from scratch, trying to solve a problem which nobody was trying to solve, raise funding for it, save it from going bad, which eventually went bad, and get out successfully of a company, that was a story which was successful for everyone, even for the customers. And my key achievements were also around being able to solve a problem that was important to be solved. Nobody was solving it, and do it using some really cool things like machine learning. So all of those, came down to my my capacity, my skill of working very very comfortably on complex problems and in a very high tech environment, and that got me into in the role that I am, like trying to solve a complex problem of fraud and using machine learning and several levels of interaction, trying to do it on a business, compliance, and finance level, apart from working directly with engineers. And I identified all of this, but it's not always possible, right? So sometimes you need to do a little more, and that little more, according to me, is you have to get the right mentorship. So and understand, it's always possible to figure things out yourself. Most of us do that, right? But it's always better to always have a sounding board. So get a mentor who can always back your place, who can critically challenge you, who can once you identify your leverage, as I said, who could just help you do better using the same. So that is one of the things I would suggest as a final advice on how to leverage your background to transition into product management. And with that, I think I will leave the screen sharing, and I'll pass it on back to Piyush. Unless there are questions, I'll be happy to answer to.